Hello, my name is Brady Parker, and this presentation is on the poem The Heroism of War Is a Lie by Jesse Wells. In the poem inspired by Jean-Paul Sartre, The Heroism of War Is a Lie, poet and musician Jesse Wells dismantles the oldest idea that war is heroic. First shared this year on his Instagram @WellsMusic, the poem emerges in a period of crazy political ideology, including worldwide political unrest and the constant threat of global conflict. Wells' poems fights the common glorification of war and the manipulation behind patriotic propaganda, using compelling words and moral conviction. Wells reveals the corruption, death, and hopelessness that follows along in warfare. It serves as a wake-up call to the romanticizing of destruction and a demand for change. Jesse Wells, better known online as @WellsMusic, is a singer-songwriter, poet, and performer, recognized for his distinctive voice and songs that address major news headlines and significant world events. Many have compared him to the likes of Woody Guthrie, another folk protest singer. Jesse was born in 1992 in Ozark, Arkansas, where he spent his youth playing guitar and listening to folk, country, classic rock, as well as the Beatles and Nirvana. Much of his songs grapple with the themes of political/business corruption, individualism, and consumerism. The author's purpose throughout this poem is he exposes the hypocrisy and moral decay in society. He challenges the propaganda that glorifies violence and false patriotism. He reflects modern frustration with warfare and political deception, such as the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, and all the stuff we're seeing with Trump and past presidents. He was influenced by anti-war poets and musicians such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Woody Guthrie. The relevance here is it was written during the 2020s amid worldwide global instability. It responds to the economic inequality and inflation that we see nowadays and the political distrust that comes with that. And it highlights our society's loss of moral meaning in recent years. And then we're going to listen to the poem right now.
The heroism of war is a lie. It's not the bravest who fight, but those who have no other choice. It's not the noble who die, but those who are the least equipped to avoid death. The glory of war is a mask put on to cover the despair of a people without hope. War is the manifestation of a society that's lost its meaning. Every life is disposable for a national or political ideal. When the rich wage war, it is the poor that die. The sacrifice is always made by those who have the least to gain. War is sold to the public as a necessary evil. The powerful and the rich paint it as a moral crusade, but the crusaders are the poor and the disenfranchised. This war will be a war of fear. It has been purposed thusly. People let it in slowly like a kind of ecstasy. They believe in it like they believe in chiromancy and fortune-telling. They believe in it like they believe in anything that releases them from the forging of their own destiny. Men love their fear. It reconciles them with themselves. Men get the war they deserve.
This is the poem paraphrased. Wells' poem argues that the glorification of war is not only false, but also immoral. He begins his poem bluntly: the heroism of war is a lie, immediately rejecting the narrative of romanticizing the noble soldier. Instead, he insists that those who fight out of necessity and not bravery are the true noble soldiers. His next line: it's not the bravest who fight, but those who have no other choice. only furthers the thought that those who fight while backed into a corner show true bravery, and not those who go to war looking for glorification or notoriety. The poem also exposes how propaganda masks the suffering and desperation of innocent people. Wells compares glorification to a mask that hides the despair of a people without hope, suggesting that government used the mask of patriotism, to manipulate and control the masses. Themes. The most dominant themes of Wells' poems are deception, inequality, the illusion of war, and being a necessity, and the corruption of power. The title itself gives away Wells' central theme, that the glorification of war is a lie told to the masses. Throughout the poem, he takes apart the myth that heroism comes from war, but instead shows how fear and manipulation drive human violence. Another key theme is the exploitation of power by the powerful and rich. Wells says, when the rich wage war, it is the poor that die, exposing how class hierarchy is the reason behind every war, and that the less fortunate are always viewed as expendable by the ones orchestrating war. Or in easier words, the wealthy make the decisions while the poor pay the price. This theme connects Wells to the long tradition of anti-war beliefs that are instilled in folk music, which also critiques capitalism and imperialism. Literary elements. Wells uses a range of poetic devices that he uses to strengthen his argument and emotional tone. First, he uses reputation. The recurring structure of short declarative sentences, it's not the bravest who fight, it's not the noble who die, builds rhythm. He goes into some detail on the Joe Rogan Experience about why he structures his songs like this. The reputation also mimics wartime propaganda, but is the reverse message. Each line slowly peels away the layers of illusion. The metaphor we see him use is that glory of war is a mask, which he goes on to say is a mask that hides fear and desperation. The biggest ironic part is probably when he says men love their fear, saying that men love to be comfortable if it means that, or like they rather be at home comfortable than go out and try new things if there's a risk to it. The imagery, it just basically evokes chaos and shows the chaoticness of war. He uses blunt and prophetic type tone, like he's giving a manifesto or a sermon even. The mood and tone. The overall tone of the poem is mournful, condemning, and thoughtful. Wells' voice is both outraged and soft, as if speaking from a deep moral issue. Lines like, every life is disposable for a national or political ideal, evoke hopelessness, suggesting that human life has been reduced to currency in a corrupt system. Poem pattern. Wells' poem is written in free verse without rhyming words. The lack of structure also allows Wells to mirror the chaos of his subject matter, with war itself being unpatterned and unpredictable. The word order is, however, carefully controlled, with short sentences and parallel phrasing, creating a rhythm of conviction, as said earlier, sounding more like a manifesto or even a sermon. Point of view. Wells uses third-person omniscient narration, giving the feeling of universal moral judgment. By avoiding using I or myself, Wells removes himself from the poem and instead speaks on behalf of humanity. Again, this detachment allows him to sound prophetic rather than personal grievance, reinforcing the sense that his words apply to all societies, not just one nation or era. I personally chose this poem because I have been following Wells' musical career for almost 2 years, which also is about the time he started on TikTok. With me already being a fan of Woody Guthrie, it only seems right that I would like his music. It wasn't until I watched his Joe Rogan episode that I really deep dived into his music. I followed his online presence and his videos, but I never added his songs to my playlist or anything like that. So after that Joe Rogan show, I dived deep into his music and poetry, and that's why I picked this poem because not only is it by one of my favorite singers, but it also reflects the current world conflicts and how I feel about them. The two biggest topics on my mind these days are political manipulation and learning to be peaceful within that. This poem tackles both perfectly, which on a personal level allows me to question what I am told and to look beyond the surface, challenging me to take on the responsibilities of my beliefs and fears. And my favorite line throughout the whole thing was when he said the rich wage war and it is the poor that die. Because I'm a big fan of war movies, and a lot of war movies such as Apocalypse Now, Platoon, Deer Hunter all tackle the issue of when war's popular, when war's going on, it's the poor people and the middle class that get drafted or sent to go fight, while the richer and the higher ups kids get to stay home and go to college and stuff like that. So I really like that line, and I just picked the poem because it reminds us that fear maintains control, and without fear, they can't control us. It's relevant because war remains still to this day sold as a necessary evil, and politicians justify violence with moral duty, and it also challenges misinformation that's spread by our leaders or even the social media or even your buddy at the bar. It encourages truth and accountability. My questions are for you are: can war ever be justified? Does this change your mind on some forms of patriotism, such as in the January 6th riots or storming the Capitol? And do you think people will be able to break out of this comfortable fear for the betterment of society? I used Wikipedia, and within Wikipedia, I found the second article, which dives pretty good into Jesse and more of his war type songs. And then the final one was the Joe Rogan podcast I talked about. If you are to take anything away from this video, click that YouTube link. That's a pretty good video. I know people have their arguments of Joe Rogan and not being fans of him. Watch it as a fan of Jesse Wells. He's very enlightened.